All right, good evening, everyone. We have been discussing Siyum plans. Siyum, we are getting we're getting close to the end. Getting close to the end. So start looking forward to the Siyum Shabbos Shuvah. Details to be announced. If you are in shul, you're automatically participating. So just be at Kahal Yereim that Shabbos and be participating in the exciting energy that we will bring to that Kiddush, and it's going to be amazing. Yeah. And then that's it, Sunday morning, start off Bechoros, and just a few Masechtas left, so you better jump in now, get the last few in, and once you get into the habit, right, it's hard to get out of the habit. Yeah. It's pretty good. Sheira Sheyonka Mina Treifa. The Mishnah had talked about a case where it had a kosher animal that was drinking milk from a treifa mother. The mother animal is a treifa. So that we said the halacha there is that the milk that's the rennet that's in that stomach, that milk rennet that's in that stomach is asura, is prohibited, because the milk came from the mother, which was the treifa, right? The milk of a treifa is treifa. So now this baby kosher animal has swallowed it. It's still treifa inside the stomach. But if a treifa animal were to nurse from a kosher animal, and then you shech the treifa animal, you could use the milk for making cheese, because that's kosher milk just inside of an animal that is treifa, which means that the contents of the stomach are not considered part of the animal. That's basically what we're saying, right? The contents of the stomach are not the same as the animal. The animal is treifa, but the contents of the stomach are fine, and you can have the contents of the stomach be treifa even though the animal is fine. That's what we're saying, okay? But the Gemara says, v'hakatani reisha. That is in direct contradiction to the first part of the same Mishnah. The first part of the same Mishnah said, kevas ove kochavim v'shel nevela harei asura. That if I buy a shechted animal, or we said potentially not shechted, right? That it was from and it drank from unknown sources from a non-Jew. Like a pig, for example. That's what we said yesterday, correct? So then the milk becomes prohibited. So now, that means the milk inside, let's go according to the simple explanation where the animal was actually shechted by the non-Jew. So since the animal is a nevela, right, it's not shechted by the non-Jew, it's killed by the non-Jew. So since the animal is a nevela, I cannot use the rennet from that animal in order to make cheese. So what's going on? First you tell me the contents of the animal are not subject to what the animal is, then you tell me the contents of the first you tell me, it's actually the reverse. First you tell me the contents of the stomach are prohibited if the animal is prohibited, and then at the end you tell me the contents of the animal could be permitted even if the animal itself is prohibited, as long as the source of the milk that it drank was permitted. So you have a contradiction within the same Mishnah, right? So Amar Rav Chisda says, Reisha, the first part of the Mishnah is Nira ke'ochal nevelos. So the problem is that it's all rabbinic. Really, you're right. The contents of the stomach are not the same as the animal. The rabbis added on an extra layer of prohibition. Why? Because in the first case, if the goy kills the animal and then sells you the stomach, and you take the contents of the stomach out, it looks like you're eating a non-kosher animal. Right? You just took the contents right out of the non-kosher animal. You just opened it up and ate it. Hacha, but here, when it comes to the animal being treifa, you've got a little baby animal. It's a treifa. It just drank from a mother. The mother milk is kosher. That you can take. Why? Because the animal is a treifa, but you just shechted it. So therefore, it looks like you just took milk from a shechted animal. That's not nearly as bad. Okay, so that's it. So it's completely rabbinic. And the rabbi said, since we don't want to look like you're eating from a not shechted animal. Amalei Rava says, well, 1 second, V'lav kol dekenu. There's a kal v'chomer there. It seems like it should be worse to eat it from a treifa than to eat it from a non-shechted animal, because uman nevela de meisa. Non-shechted animals are gross, right? There's a big, there was a joke hillbilly cookbook where you've got roadkill, right? Basically, recipes you can make when you hit a raccoon with a car or something like that, right? It's gross, basically. Animals that die without shchita is more disgusting.
So only rednecks would do that.
Rednecks. Yes, I thought you said rednecks. I'm thinking cheese, right? Right. Rednecks. Yes, rednecks will do this. So that's the point. Is it's gross. So therefore, nevela, you're naturally not going to eat. So therefore, deisharis le kevaso lo asli mechamine. So if I were to permit you to take the liquid milk out of the stomach of that animal and use it to make cheese, I shouldn't have to worry that you might come to eat from the nevela itself, because the nevela itself is gross. Nobody's going to eat from it. So amart lo trefash. So therefore, you nevertheless, that's where you say the rabbi's going to say, still you can't use it. Still that looks bad. Okay, then treifa shchuta, if I've got a treifa animal and I shecht it, which doesn't look gross at all, you should be worried that if I let you take the milk out of that stomach, I might actually eat some of that treifa because it's just perfectly shechted, just like any other piece of meat. So lo kol shekain, for sure the rabbi should have made it prohibited. It doesn't make sense. The rabbis would prohibit you to eat the contents of a nevela animal, but would still permit you to eat the contents of the stomach of a treifa animal. Right? So why would the rabbis do that? El Amar Rav Yitzchak, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rather, Rabbi Yitzchak says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Lo kasha, it's not a problem. Kan kodim chazara, kan le'acher chazara. This is before the great flip-flop of Rabbi Yeshua and versus after the great flip-flop of Rabbi Yeshua. We sort of talked about it briefly, but now since we have a little bit of time, just to remember that in Daf Chaf Tes in Maseches Avodah Zarah, Rabbi Yeshua was asked the question, why can't you eat cheese from non-Jews? And Rabbi Yeshua told him that's because non-Jews take the rennet, the milk contents of the stomach, from non-kosher animals, and they use that to make their cheese. And that seems to be not kosher. So they asked Rabbi, so that's before he changed his mind. So at that point, Rabbi Yeshua held the contents of the stomach of a non-kosher animal is not kosher. Therefore, you can't take non-kosher rennet and make cheese with it. That would be non-kosher cheese. That's how Rabbi Yeshua started off. Then it was pointed out to him, but 1 second, if you have a korban olah, if you have a korban, which is a olah sacrifice, all of the entire animal is prohibited from use. Can't get any benefit out of a korban olah. If I have a korban olah and I open the stomach and I find rennet, the milk inside of the korban olah, I can make cheese with that. But why? Why can I make cheese with that? If the animal is prohibited to use, the contents of the stomach are just like the animal, I shouldn't be allowed to use it. Clearly the contents of the stomach of the animal are not. Then the Gemara over there goes back and forth, tries to come up with multiple reasons.
I think you're from a non-kosher animal though.
Well, you bought it from a non-Jew, right? The non-Jew sold it to you. It was already dead, right? So this is an olah. So now the Gemara there goes back and forth, and Rabbi Yeshua has to try to come up with a better answer as to why the cheese of non-Jews is not kosher. They come up with potentially mixed it with non-kosher milk or other kinds of things that they threw in there, and they say it doesn't congeal. Maybe it's in the holes of the cheese. Anyway, that's the Gemara over there. But the bottom line is Rabbi Yeshua concedes and changes his mind and says that the contents of the stomach is not prohibited like the animal. So therefore, that's what's going on in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah starts off telling us the contents of an animal that's bought from a non-Jew that's not kosher. You can't use that contents for cheese. That's what Rabbi Yeshua used to think. Then the end of the Mishnah says that I can use the contents of a treifa animal stomach as long as it drank from a kosher animal. That's after Rabbi Yeshua changed his mind. So you have in the same Mishnah before Rabbi Yeshua changed his mind and afterwards? The answer is yeah, because Mishnah lo zazo mimkoma, we have a principle called the Mishnah doesn't change. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi established the texts of the Mishnah, and people started memorizing it. So therefore, once they established the text of the Mishnah, according to Rabbi Yeshua had held one way, even though Rabbi Yeshua changed his mind, they added to the text at the end of the Mishnah, but they didn't remove the old text. So therefore, the old text is what Rabbi Yeshua used to hold. The new text at the end of the Mishnah is what Rabbi Yeshua currently holds. So yes, there is a contradiction inherent in this Mishnah, but there's a reason for it. Okay, and it's a famous flip-flop because it's in Maseches Avodah Zarah. Thank you. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Chia bar Abba says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Ma'midin bekevas nevelos ve'ein ma'midin bekevas shchitas ovekochavim. Rabbi Chia bar Abba says that Rabbi Yochanan that you can make cheese using the rennet contents of a non-shechted animal, That's the cheese is fine, but you cannot use the rennet contents of a shechted animal from a idol worshiper. Now, we had discussed before that the Mishnah had used those two phrases. I bought it from an idol worshiper and I bought it from Nevela and said, isn't that the same thing? Why can't I use it from the idol worshiper? Because he doesn't shecht, right? So therefore I'm buying it from. So the answer is no, it could be that there's a potential difference between buying an animal that was shechted by a non-Jew and buying an animal that was just killed plain. Right? Amar lefanav Rabbi Shimon bar Abba Keman. So Rabbi Shimon bar Abba says in front of him, right? Who's this like? Who makes a distinction between an animal that was killed by a non-Jew, shechted by a non-Jew, versus an animal that was just killed? He says the difference is Rabbi Eliezer. It's like Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says, "Stam machshavas oved kochavim lavodus kochavim." Non-Jews have idolatry on their mind. So therefore, if a non-Jew were to slaughter the animal, he would be doing so for the purposes of idolatry, consecrating everything in the animal for idolatry. Now, the consecrating of the animal for idolatry, right? So the milk that's in the stomach also becomes prohibited because having a full stomach helps the animal look fatter, which honors idolatry. So therefore, you can't even use the milk contents of an animal slaughtered by an idol worshiper. However, if the animal just died, if it's a regular nevela, that stomach contents you could use. That's Rabbi Eliezer Shita, and that's the distinction between the two cases. So Amar Le, Rabbi Chia bar Abba was astonished by the question. He says, Ve'ela Kaman, of course for sure, this is according to Rabbi Eliezer. Who else would make a distinction? Kiyasar Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak. So Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak came from Eretz Yisrael Bavel. Amar, he said, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mamidin bein bekevas nevela, bein bekevas shchita sovay kochavim, shelo lachush l'divrei Rabbi Eliezer. The halach is you can use the rennet that comes from animals that are shechted by non-Jews, idol worshippers, or just die. You can use all of that. Why? Because we don't hold like this opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, right? There's no distinction. We don't presume that, obviously, yes, if there was a non-idol worshipping priest and he was, doing the, ripping the animal's heart out or whatever they do for idol worship.
Priest in a church or priest in a...
I like like in priest in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. That's like that.
Now I understand.
Okay, in that sense, right? So that is that even that is not going to be considered something that's going to make it prohibited because we don't hold like Rabbi Eliezer. Now, if he's literally like he's doing it for others, then it would be. But you can't presume that that's always what I don't see. You have your next door neighbor, right? And he's, Bob Murphy is going to go outside. He shechts his animal. That doesn't mean that it's an idol worshiper, right? So the halacha is ein ma'amidin be'or kevas nevela. We're not allowed to use cheese made from the rennet from a nevela, right? Because the Rabbanan were saying that it is, right? We have made that extra rabbinic decree. We don't want you to use that. Aval ma'amidin bekevas nevela, but you can use, that's the or kevas nevela. That's if you use the actual piece of the stomach. Because there, you're actually using the meat, and the meat will impart the flavor. It doesn't even have to be of a non-kosher animal. Even if it's just meat using the meat from a kosher animal, you have a basar b'chalav problem. Yeah. So you can't actually use the piece of the stomach. But aval ma'amidin bekevas nevela, but you can use the rennet contents of a non-kosher stomach of the non-kosher animal that has not been shechted, and from an idol worshiper. Now, the last section, there's a different version of the halacha that will go against how Rashi interprets the Gemara, so we'll leave the parentheses out and finish the subject there. Says the next Mishnah. Okay, next Mishnah. Chomer b'chelev mi badam. We have a pasuk in the Torah that says kol ochel. Right, the pasuk is kol chelev shor v'kesev ha'ez lo sochelu. You're not allowed to eat any of these chelev fats that come from an ox or a sheep or a goat. And then it says ki kol ochel chelev min ha'behemet she'yakriv mimeni shel Hashem. Anybody who does so, v'nichros ha'nefesh ha'ches me'ameha. The soul will be cut off from your people, from his people. And v'chol hadam. Next pasuk continues. Kol hadam lo sochelu. Can't eat any blood. Mikveh chomosh v'sechem lo'ofel behema from a poultry, from fowl, or from animals. Kol nefesh shetochel dam. Anybody who does eat blood, v'nichros nefesh will have his soul cut off. Okay, so that's two prohibitions. Can't eat chelev, can't eat blood. Says the Mishnah, some things about a chaylev are more strict than blood. Some things about blood is more strict than chaylev. Chomer b'chaylev mi b'dam. Here's what's more strict about chaylev than blood. Chomer b'dam mi b'chaylev, and there's other things that are more strict by blood than by chaylev. Chomer b'chaylev, the strictness of the chaylev meats is sheha chaylev on Kuf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph moa linbo. You can commit me'ila. Me'ila is the prohibition in the Torah against getting any benefit from something that belongs to the Beis HaMikdash. So there's two different types of korbanos. Remember, we had kodshe kodshim and kodshe kalim. Kodshe kodshim are the korbanos that a regular person cannot consume, right? Let's say for, the korban ola, korban chatos, only a kohen can eat the meat from the korban chatos. Those animals are property of Hashem immediately as soon as they're consecrated. You cannot get any benefit from those animals at all. If you do, you've committed me'ila. When it comes to a korban shlomim, right, then you would wind up, let's say that's a kodshe kalim, it's a lenient, right? So you're allowed to eat those after you throw the blood, so then the meat becomes permitted. The chaylev remains prohibited. The chaylev you can't, and you have to burn it on the mizbeach. So the kodshe, the chaylev is still, you can commit me'ila by chaylev. Where see, there's no me'ila, there's no such thing as getting benefit from the blood of the animal. If you get benefit from the blood of the animal, you do not commit me'ila. We'll see why. Also, when it comes to chaylev, you could have prohibitions of a prohibited piece of meat be doubly prohibited based on the fact that it's both chaylev and it could be pigel, right? You could have the animal shechted in order to burn the chaylev beyond the proper time or whatever, and then you could eat that chaylev or consume the chaylev, and now you're liable for eating the pigel and for eating chaylev. Also, no, sir, if you leave it over to the morning, also if it's tameh, if it's, you can wind up getting two averos for both the fact that it's chaylev and also eating this meat of the korban invalidly. Masha ein kein b'dam, which is not the case by blood. Those averos don't apply to the blood at all. Chomer badam, the stringencies by blood is shahadam noheg bebehema chayv of. Blood is prohibited whether it's a domesticated animal, a non-domesticated animal, or birds. Bain Tameim, which is not the case by chaylev, of course. Chaylev is permitted by a chaya. Chaylev is not existent by birds, so therefore it's only a behema prohibition. And also, Bain Tameim, Bain Tehorim, blood is also prohibited whether it's kosher animals or non-kosher animals. You have a chaylev prohibition by a non-kosher animal, so chaylev prohibition by eating camel fat, right? And chaylev eno noheg ella bebehema tehora bilvad. Chaylev is only by kosher animals. Okay, says the Gemara. Minani mili. Let's start with how we learn these different things. How do we know that there is such a concept of me'ila, of getting prohibited benefit from a korban, regardless of the fact that the korban, obviously kodshe kodshim, right, belongs to Hashem, so there's me'ila there, but maybe me'ila only applies to kodshe kodshim. How do you know it applies to kodshe kalim as well? So I'm Rabbi Yanai says, Damar Kro, the pasuk says, kasher yuram mishor zevach hashlamim. So in talking about the bull that a anointed kohen brings in a circumstance where he commits the avera, right? Negligently, we had talked about that in Maseches Horios. So there it says that you're supposed to burn the fats, the emurim, the inner fats, on the mizbeach, and it throws in an extra connection. It says you should burn them just like you would burn the fats from an ox. You should burn the fats from the ox just like you would from a shlomim korban. Well, what do you mean? You just told me to burn them. You don't have to tell me like a shlomim korban. So sounds like you're learning how to burn them. How do you burn them? Like a shlomim. But you don't need that because so v'chima lamanu mishur zevach hashlomim. What is this coming to teach us? The pasuk just told me how to burn them, and then it says, "Hey, just like a shlomim." Why does that tell me just like a shlomim? I already just told me all the rules. Me'ata harei zeba lelamed v'nimtza lamed. So he says what's going on here is that it sounds like what the pasuk is doing is telling you, you know how to do a chatos? Take a look at a shlomim. But then the pasuk tells you all the instructions. So it looks like it's trying to teach you how to do a chatos, but really what's happening is it's telling you that just like I just told you how to do this chatos, that's also the rule by a shlomim as well. So makish zevach hashlomim lepar kohen Mashiach. So it's connecting, making a connection, saying there's a halachic connection between this par of the kohen Mashiach, this bull that the kohen Mashiach brings, and the regular shlomim. Ma par kohen Mashiach yesh bo meila, just like the bull of the kohen Mashiach is kodshe kodshem, and therefore there's meila Afshur Zevach Shlamim, also if I have an ox, which is a Shlamim Korban, Yesh Bo Me'ila. You also have a problem of Me'ila after you throw the blood. And therefore, by the Imurim, which are supposed to be burned on the Mizbeach, if I get benefit from those Imurim instead of burning them on the Mizbeach, I have committed the prohibition of Me'ila. Amar late Rabbi Chanina says to Rabbi Yanai, that's nice, but Ke'ura Zu Shoshana Rebbe, what's wrong with the pshat that Rebbe gave? That told us how you know kacheg kalim are appropriate for me'ilah. Says you don't like his drasha, you have to come up with your own. How about this? Pasuk says kol chelev la, right? It says all of the chelev, right? So that comes to include lerabos emurim kodshim kalim leme'ilah. That tells me that all emurim of kodshim kalim, right? It says all chelev, right? It has a prohibition of me'ilah. So that means that all of them, he'll call them Murik, even Kodshei Kalim, have Me'ilah. Right? The Pasuk says, Chelev, right? It says Kodshei Hashem, Kodshei, is it called Kodshei Hashem? What's the Pasuk there? 1 second. Gimel. Nope, that's not the Pasuk. This is Tes Zayin. Yeah, it's Kol Chelev Hashem. I've read it look because it doesn't have the slash here, and that's in the vowelized notes here. It's Kol Chelev La Hashem, right? All the Chelev belongs to Hashem. You're not allowed to get any benefit from it. So it's L'Rabos Emurei Kodshim Kalim Leme'ilah. So that means all of the Emurim are for Hashem. You cannot get any benefit from it. It's regardless of whether it was Kodshei Kalim, Kodshei Kodshim. Doesn't matter. That's how Rebbe learned it. Okay, so Amar Abaye. So Abaye says I need both psukim. Because itzrich, dikas of Rachmana chaylev. If the pasuk only said chaylev Hashem, hava mina chaylev in yoseres ushte haklayos ushte klayos lo. Then I would have thought that the fats, right? It says that would have told me the rest of the emurim, the forbidden fats, but the fats which are on the liver and on the kidneys, right? They're not called chaylev. They're not in the same. So I would have said lo. They don't have me'ilah. So therefore, kasav rachmana kasher yuram. Therefore, the pasuk says by the korban chatos of the kohen that just like everything that is burned on the chatos, by that all of that which is burned by the chatos is also chelev by the shlamim. Is also what do you call it? Me'ilah would also be me'ilah by the shlamim. So therefore, we know that fats on the kidneys and the fats on the liver, which might not be included in the word chelev, are also me'ilah. Because of Rachmana Kasher Yuram, and if I had used the pasuk by the bull, so then Havamina chelev, I would have said the fats that alya delesi b'shur lo. I would have said the fats. Okay, fine. All the chelev, all of the fats, the liver, the kidneys, all of that would be included. But you know what's not included? What about the fatty tails? The fatty tails, which if you bring a sheep, the fatty tail has to be burned. But if you bring a goat or a ram or an ox, they don't have a fatty tail and they don't have to be burned on the mizbeach. So therefore, if the source pasuk was a bull or an ox, doesn't have a fatty tail, so then maybe there's no prohibition of me'ilah by the fatty tail because it wouldn't be included in a bull. So therefore, the pasuk says, because the pasuk says kol chelev to include the fatty tail as well, right? That's the story that of Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. There was a non-Jew who was bragging about the fact that he liked to eat every year, go to the Beis Hamikdash and get a piece of Korban Pesach. And you're not allowed to eat a Korban Pesach if you're not Jewish. So he was lying and pretending he was Jewish. So he tells the guy, so, did they ever give you from the fatty tail? And he says, no, I've never had that. He goes, oh, that's because that's the best part. Next year you should get that. So he goes, okay, I'm going to get that. Right? So the guy shows up at the Beis Hamikdash, says, I want the fatty tail. And they're like, what are you talking about? It's a Korban Pesach, it's from a sheep. You're supposed to burn the fatty tail. You're not supposed to get it. They realized there's something. They asked him, who told you to get the fatty tail? They said, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira told me. So, well, wait a second. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira is sending us a message. So they investigated and they found that he wasn't Jewish and they killed the guy. So, right? So therefore, that's the story. You see that there's a distinction of fatty tail. You cannot eat it, right?
He just got punked.
That's correct. He got punked in a very serious way. That's the understatement, right? He got punked. That's Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira punked. Okay. So there you see that the fatty tail is something that you can't is part of korban. You cannot eat, but only some animals. Okay, so that's why I need both of those drashos. Rav Mari l'Rav Zvid. So Rav Mari says to Rav Zvid, I alya ikri chelev. If this fatty tail is really called chelev, right? So then titzar ba'achila. so then you shouldn't be allowed to eat it either, right? If you tell me it's chaylev and therefore it's supposed to be burned and I can't get me'ila for it, so then can I eat a fatty tail? Let's say I take a regular sheep and I shecht it. So I'm not allowed to eat the tail? So he says that should be the case. So Amar Le, he said to him, Alech Amar Kra, he says, that sounds right, but that's why the pasuk specifically says, Kol chaylev shor v'chesev va'ez, lo so chaylev. That's not in the pasuk, in the Gemara. But all of the chaylev of an ox, of a sheep, and a goat, you shall not eat. Meaning, davar shava b'shor v'chesev va'ez. The only parts you're not allowed to eat, those are the parts that are on all three types of animals: an ox, a goat, and a sheep. And of course, and the fatty tail is only an issue on the sheep, right? So you can't commit me'ila if you're bringing a sheep, but you don't have committed an avera of eating chaylev if you eat a fatty tail. Rav Ashi Amar Chelbo ha'alya ikri. So he says the fatty tail, right, is not just called the alya. It's called there's difference between. It says between chelbo ha'alya, right? Pasuk says it's words to chaylev stama lo ikri. It's not called chaylev by itself. It's called the fatty, the fat from the tail. The fat from the tail is not the same thing as the tail itself. The tail itself is permissible to eat. That's why it's not prohibited to eat. El me'ata. So if that is the case, if it's not prohibited to eat, lo yimaluba, then why would it be me'ila? It's not part of the prohibitions. So therefore, right? So sounds like it gets so Ella machvarta kid Rav Zvid. So rather, we like Rav Zvid's answer that the aliyah is called chaylev, right? The aliyah is chaylev, but the pasuk specifically tells you you're allowed to eat it, but it is chaylev, and therefore it would be under the prohibitions of me'ila if you use it because you're not allowed to eat it if it's supposed to be burned in the mizbeach. Okay, now masha'ain came bedam. So all of this Me'ila rules apply to, we just learned all these Me'ila rules. They apply to Kachik Kachin, they apply to Kachik Kalim, but they don't apply to blood. Why not? Minoni Mili, how do I know that there's no prohibition against getting any benefit from the blood of Korbanos? Famously, the valley, the Silwan Valley, which was on the right outside of the old city, was an extremely fertile area. Why? Because they had the water that would run from the Beis HaMikdash through. They had that trench of water that would run in through the Beis HaMikdash. Lots of blood from all the korbanos would be in that water, and it would run out, and it would fertilize all the soil that was all around. Very fertile area. You had lots of proteins and whatever nutrients in the soils, the nitrates or whatever it is, the nitrates. You have to be able to get into the soil in order to grow plants. It was very, very fertile area.
Nitro.
And the issue was, right? Am I committing me'ila by benefiting from those plants because I'm benefiting from the blood? And the answer is no, right? There's no me'ila by blood. You can get all the benefit you want from the blood. So, Miyonani Mili, how do I know that? So, Amar Ula, so Ula says, De Amar Kra, the pasuk says, Lachem, right? Pasuk says that the nefesh of the basar is in the dam, the nefesh of the animal is in the blood, and it says lachem, that it belongs to you, right? A kapara, meaning shalachem yehe. The fact that pasuk says it's for you, what does it mean the blood is for you? It means that it's yours, right? Meaning even though it's part of a korban, it's like chulin. You can use it, get benefit from it, that's not a problem. Debei Rabbi Yishmael Tana, in the Yeshiva Yishmael they learned, lechaper, the purpose of the blood is for an atonement, lekapara nisativ velo lemeila. Its purpose is atonement, not to prevent you from using it. There's no prevention. It gets you a kapara. Now, I'm not quite sure where the drush is, and that may be the fact is that the kapara is a benefit, right? Since I'm getting benefit from using the blood as a kapara, it indicates that benefit. You can't say blood is not beneficial. You can't get benefit from blood if I'm using it in order to. That's my own.
Would Rashi and Zvachim explain it better?
Sorry?
Rashi and Zvachim, would that explain it better?
Rashi and Zvachim?
Yeah.
I don't know which Rashi and Zvachim. Oh, he's got a Rashi and Zvachim.
46a.
I'd have to go look back at Rashi and Zvachim. I'm sure Rashi and Zvachim explains it better. Rashi has a track record of explaining things better than me. So, he says, he actually brings in the notes, Zvachim, Shenechshav Kachim, Elin Kapara, Velin Me'ila. He says it's for Kapara, it's not for Me'ila. That's how he says it. Okay. My drush is not excluded from that, but okay. Anyway, Gimel. The third thing, Rabbi Yochanan, third drush, Rabbi Yochanan says, Amar Kol pasuk says, who, the blood is who banefesh, it is the blood, and it means who. It is the way that it is. Blood is unchanging in status, Meaning, lifnei kapara, kiliachar kapara. You throw eventually during the sacrifice process, you throw the blood against the mizbeach. The blood status doesn't change. Whatever the status of the blood was before you threw the blood is the same status the blood has after you throw the blood. Maliachar kapara ein bo me'ilah. Just like after you throw the blood, then there's no, of course you could use it because there's nothing else to use it for. There's no things. Af lifnei kapara, even before you throw the blood in the mizbeach, and the blood has a purpose to throw against the mizbeach, ein bo me'ilah. There's no prohibition. If I get benefit out of it, there's no me'ilah prohibitions out of it. Okay, so the ema liachar kapara lifnei kapara. Well, you tell me that it's the same before and after. Why don't you flip that? Why don't you say that since I can't use it before I throw the blood, because I need that blood in order to throw it in order to get atonement, I also can't use it afterwards, and it should be a me'ilah problem, right? The answer is ein lecha davar shenasa mitzvoso u'limbo. It makes no sense because there's no such thing as something that the mitzvah was done to it, it was used properly, and now that the mitzvah was done, you can still commit me'ilah afterwards. It was blood, you threw the blood, you did it properly. It's inconceivable the blood would remain prohibited for you to use after you've used it properly. Once something is used properly, it's permissible for any other use. So, velo, really? I'll show you a few examples where that doesn't seem to be the case. What about v'harei trumas hadeshen? The trumas hadeshen, they would go up on the mizbeach every morning and they would scoop the ashes, hopefully not push anybody off, and they would scoop up the ashes, come down, and make a pile next to the mizbeach. So, denasa mitzvaso, the ashes I already did the mitzvah. I burned everything the way it was supposed to do. Umoa limbo, and there's a me'ilah prohibition because I'm going to use the ashes properly. The pasuk says, "V'sama leitzal mizbeach." You've got to put these ashes next to the mizbeach. If I take these ashes and I use it for my personal use, I'm committing me'ilah. It says I'm supposed to put them. So, why is that? If I've done the mitzvah on them already, why can I commit me'ilah? So the answer is mishum dahavei trumas hadeshen ubig dekuna shtei ksuvim me'bayin ke'achad. The answer is, it's true, there are cases, actually two cases, where the mitzvah was done with it, and still is prohibited from me'ilah, okay? And the two of them are Trumas Hadeshen, and the other one are the Big Day Kahuna, the clothing of the Kohen, right? That even though I've used the begadim of the Kohen Gadol, right? I'm not the point of the Kohen, right? But begadim of the Big Day Kahuna, still I can't get personal benefit from them, okay? So those two, the Pesukim tell me I'm not allowed to get personal benefit from those two. Those are the only two circumstances. We call this a shnei ksuvim. Call shnei ksuvim a boin ke'achad ein melamdin. And here's the rule: whenever the Torah tells you something twice, the same thing, that's an exception. Why? Because if I told you one time, that would be a mehatzad. I would say, just like you told me once that I can't get benefit out of something even though I've done a mitzvah, that would be the rule for all other cases. That's what he told it to me in this circumstance, and now I'm going to apply that rule to all other similar circumstances. Why does the Torah have to say it a second time then? Because if it meant the second time, then that second was already included, because I already used the Mematziner to learn it. So the point that you write it the second time is to tell me that it's actually not true all the time. It's only true when I say so. So therefore, I've only written it twice. It means it's not true the rest of the times. It's only true these two times. So hanicha l'Rabbanan. So that's great according to the Rabbanan. This is our argument in Maseches Yuma. De Amri, they say that about the Kohen Gadol in Yom Kippur, that he takes off his linen garments and vehinicham sham, and he puts them in a special room and he leaves them there. Geniza, right? He can't use them anymore. He used them for Yom Kippur. He can't use them anymore. So they tune in Geniza, right? Ella, the Rebbe.
Did you use the next year on Yom Kippur?
No. They're done, right? Use them on this Yom Kippur, use once and for all, right? The Gemara there will tell us that the Kohen Gadol, that was a custom. The Kohen Gadol's mom used to make him really, really nice ones, right? So everybody, they would really make them really super fancy and really nice. And so that was they would take them off. Now, that is the opinion of the Rabbanan. So therefore, there is something, the mitzvah was done to it, and nevertheless, there's a me'ilah problem. You can't use them anymore. So that's fine according to the Rabbanan, but Ela the Rabbi Dosa, according to Rabbi Dosa, Damar Shalo Yishtamish Bahen LeYom HaKippurim Acher, that all it means is you can't use them for next year's Yom Kippur. But these white garments could be used. What are they useful for? Those garments are the exact same white garments that a regular Kohen uses every day. So once they're done for Yom Kippur, so let this Kohen donate, give it to his younger brother, and let him use them as his as his big day kahuna when he's serving in the base of Mikdash, right? You can use him. That's no reason why not to use him. Not a problem. Well, that is the whole idea here with the blood and for everything. Once I've used it for the mitzvah properly, there's no me'ila problem anymore, which is interesting because we normally would say, but something is used for a mitzvah, so I don't throw it away, I don't treat it disrespectfully, right? But that doesn't mean I can't get benefit from it. Me'ila is a benefit problem. Right? I can get all the benefit I want. If I have a esrog, I've done my mitzvah with it, I can eat it after Sukkot. Right? I don't have to worry about it, right? Taking something and throwing it in the garbage, take my lulav and throwing it in the garbage, that we don't do. Take my lulav and lighting it on fire, right? We have the custom to burn it with the chametz, but theoretically, if I just wanted to throw it in the fireplace, keep it warm, I theoretically could, right? That's not a problem.
Some people do the lulav and esrog together.
Right, so there you go, right? Some people have esrog jam, right? Yeah. So ma'ikla meimar. So what are you going to say, right? There's no shnei ksum b'mayin kechad because there's only one time. Ella mishum dahavai trumas hadeshin ve'egla rufa shnei ksum b'mayin kechad. Okay, they would hold that there is another time when something the mitzvah is done and it remains prohibited, and that is the egla rufa, the calf that is brought when you don't know where the murderer of a person who's found between two cities, and they have to bring the calf and they break the back of the neck. So the halacha there is that their calf, after its neck is broken, is prohibited from getting any benefit out of. So therefore, even though the mitzvah was done, can't get any benefit. So there's two circumstances, right? The trumas hadeshen and the egla rufa. Kol shnei ksum b'ayin kechad ein melamdin. So therefore, those are the only two times. So hanichel man damar ein melamdin. So that's fine. There is an opinion. There's a machlokas in kedushin. Whether shnei ksuvim b'ayin kechad, you don't teach, right? We took that for granted that was the case. But elaman da'amar, there is an opinion that says melamdin, that two, if it's written twice in the Torah, you still learn it to all the other cases. So ma'ikla meimar. So what are you going to say according to that opinion? So the answer is, on Kuf Yud Zayin Beis, Trei mi'ute ksive. There's two places where there's a limiter, right? So hacha ksiv, it says here, right, by the Trumas Hadeshin, v'samo eitzel mizbeach, the pasuk v'samo, you shall place it by the mizbeach, which means it. Only this rule of me'ila, putting it after the mitzvah is done with it, you've got to still place it someplace. That is a specific rule by this case. So this, the Torah tells us, is an exception to the rule. And Hossam, by the Egel Ruf, it says, Ksiv ha'arufa. There's an extra hay there. The calf that had its neck broken. This calf is unique and special in that it's prohibited, as opposed to all other times the mitzvah is done on an item where the object does not become prohibited. So therefore, those are unique. Okay, so now, we're to ask another question. Tlasa kroy lamali bedam. Why do I need three different psukim? I had three different, right? 1, 2, and 3. We had three different sources for why blood is not me'ila. Why do I need three? So the answer is, it's not just to tell me that it's not me'ila. It's to tell me that it doesn't have the same rules as there are three different rules that don't apply to blood. Number one, chad lemute mi nosar, to tell me blood from a leftover korban, leftover till the morning, is not nosar, you don't have to burn it. Chad lemute mi me'ila. Second of all, to tell me that blood there's no me'ila problem, you can get benefit out of it. Chad lemute mi tuma. And the third one, to tell me that if it becomes tameh and I eat it, I'm not eating tuma of a korban. Right? It doesn't transmit tumah, that it doesn't become a tameh piece of a kachim that way. So those are my three things. About pigel, mi pigel lo tzarech kra. What about the pigel? I don't need a pasuk to tell me that blood doesn't apply to pigel doesn't apply to blood, because it's obvious if you know the rules of pigel. And that is that the Tanah in the Mishnah in Maseches Zvachim had told us the rules of pigel. Kol sheyesh lo matirin, anything that becomes permitted by some other item, some other action in the korban, bein le'odam, bein mizbeach, whether that permission is now for a human being to eat it or that permission is for the mizbeach to be burned on the mizbeach, chayav mishum pigel, that item can become pigel. For example, the meat of the korban. The meat of korban I cannot eat until the blood is thrown. The blood is the permitter, right? The meat is the pigel. I have to burn the chalev after I throw the blood. The blood is the permitter. The chalev is the item that's permitted after I throw the blood. So therefore, v'dam gufei matir, the blood is the permitter. Since the blood is the permitter, it's not pigul is not applicable to it. That's the thing that you throw that permits the other things. The other things can become pigul, the blood cannot. So therefore, pigul doesn't apply to blood. I don't need a special pasuk. I just need to know the rules of pigul. Once you know the rules of pigul, so you know that blood, it makes no sense. Hadron Allah kol basar, kol basar, kol basar. That concludes Perek Kol Ha-Basar. And I will temporarily
Now
into Ha'or V'Harotev. Okay.
Oh, gravy, nice.
Yes, we're now we do the gravy. Skin and gravy, Ha'or V'Harotev, V'Kipa, and the sediments, V'Ha'alal. The alal is the stringy parts of the meat. When you're cutting the meat off of the skin of the animal, sometimes there's some stringy pieces of meat that remain. That some, huh?
Like a pulled brisket.
Well, except that it's stuck to the hide.
Oh,
So you don't you don't want the things to get stuck to the hide. There's the little pieces of flesh. You pull the skin off, right? No, it's just like the meat is your skin is stuck to the meat, right? When you skin the animal, you get little pieces of meat on it, right? If you want to work this hide, right? They would take the hide and they would soak it in like a lime in order to be able to remove the hair, and it removes the pieces of meat from the inside of it. They soak it in there for 3 days. That's like the worst smelling thing in the world. I'm told,
if you want to do it.
right? By that's where they do tanning. That's the first stage of the tanning, right? But there's little pieces of meat that's on that hide. That's the alal. Not like the airline. I hope. Samos. I don't think that's why they named it. And
is it like the white fatty layer on top, right under the skin?
It could be, but I think it even has like stringy pieces of actual meat. So if it's just white fatty,
right, actual red.
Yeah, I think so. V'hatzamos in the bones, v'hagidin in the sinews, v'karnayim and the horns, v'talfayim and the hooves, mitztarfim letame tumas ochlin. If I've got those pieces together, they can mix together to make a piece of meat that I have. All of that can combine together in order to make the volume that I need to transmit food tuma. Food tuma, I need an egg's volume of food in order for tuma to be transferred to and from that tuma, right? So if I have like a piece of meat, right, and this piece of meat has these fringes attached to it, or the piece of meat is attached to the hoof. So those other pieces can combine together with the meat in order to make the kibetza amount of food, right? Aval, however, lo tumas nevelos. But I can't take that and say that now it's making the tuma of nevela. Tuma of nevela is a more severe tuma. That's the tuma of the actual dead animal itself, right? The tuma of the dead. Why is it more severe? Because the tuma of nevela is an ava tuma. It's a father level of tuma. It can transmit tuma even to a person, right? Food tuma is a lower level. Rishon tuma or second sheni tuma can transmit to other foods and to utensils, but it doesn't transmit to truma. But it doesn't transmit over to people. So the tuma nevela, right? But all I need is an olives portion. Smaller portion, but we're going to see, and the Gemara is going to ask why. Where do we know that from? The answer is going to be a pasuk. It tells us it has to be from the actual body of the meat itself. So therefore, I can't combine any of these other side parts to it in order to make it nevela. Kayotzebo, similarly, hashochet behema tmea leove kochavim. If somebody shechts a animal which is not kosher for idolatry, umifarchesas, and the animal's still kicking. Now it's a Jewish guy. He's performing valid shchita, right? And it's a non-kosher animal. So he's doing shchita on a pig, right? But shchita is a defining action which turns something into food for Jewish people. So therefore, the fact that you are shechting it, and you have in mind, why am I doing it? It's a pig, so I can't eat it. But my friend, my neighbor, is not Jewish. He can eat it. So I'm shechting it so that he can have breakfast. Right? So if that's why I'm doing it, and the animal, so once I've done shchita, even if the animal is still moving, metama tumas ochlin, the meat from that animal can transmit tuma of food because by the Jew doing the shchita, he's designated this pig as food, despite the fact that it's still moving, in which case it's not really dead yet, and so it's not really edible by the non-Jew yet, right? Aval, lo tumas nevelos, ad shetomos. But it can't transmit tuma as a nevela until it's actually dead, right? So this is not, you can't make a kosher pig, right? You can't shechit, so therefore it's going to be a nevela. So it can't be having nevela. A moving animal that dies not through shechita is not dead until it stops moving. So therefore, that's not going to be, there's no transference of tumas of nevela. O ad she yatiz es rosha, or you can cut off its head. When you cut off an animal's head, it's dead, even if it's still moving. That's just like reflexive action, right? That's not really showing that it's alive still. Riba letame tumas ochlin mimasha riba letame tumas nevelos. There are more circumstance by tumas ochlin, as we had seen, right? More things that will combine by food tuma than will be the case by tumas nevela. Rabbi Yehuda says, ha'alal ha'mechunas, if you've got gathered up the pieces of meat that are on the hide, emyeshbo kazayis b'makom echad, if you get a kazayis in one region, chayav alav, then you could be liable for eating nevela in that circumstance, right? Because it's a significant enough a portion, and it's in one place. You can have your mind that it's going to be something significant, and it could be you could be liable for that, right? Or liable not for eating it, but liable if you touch it, you become tamei, and if you become tamei, you walk into the Beis Hamikdash, then you're liable for that, right? So you could still have tuma. So that's in disagreement to the Tanna Kama. Says the Gemara, Tanina lehod Tana Rabbanim. We learned in a Mishnah, which we had learned elsewhere. Shomrim letuma kala velo shomrim letuma chamura. Shomrim is the concept of something which is a protector of a item. What does that mean? A shell of a peanut, right? Protects the peanut inside. A bone protects the marrow that's inside. So it's not the food item itself, but a protective layer on that food item.
You mean like a pistachio shell?
Like a pistachio shell, peanut shell, right? Peel of a...
easier to crack. Pistachio shells are not, if it's fully covered.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with peanut shells. Peanut shells are not bad. Anyway, if you have a problem with peanut shells, I'm not saying it's okay. So now, if I've got... those are significant when it comes to lesser tuma. What's lesser tuma? Tumas ochlin, food tuma. So that means that if I'm counting my volume of peanuts to see if I've got enough for tumas ochlim, for food volume, I need my eggs volume, I count the shells of the peanuts, right? But there's no such thing as shomrim, like the skin or the bones, in order to make tumas nevela. That stuff doesn't add in. It doesn't help. Shomrim letuma kala minai. And how do I know that there is this concept of shomrim for tuma kala? Detana deber rishmal. We learned in the Brisa of the Yeshiva Rishmal. I'll call zera zarua, right? On all planted seeds, there's going to be a prohibition of potential tuma, transference for all planted seeds. Kederach she bnei adam motzin lizriya. So that means that in order for food tuma to transfer, it's called the seed. It's in the form and the shape, even though you're going to eat it, if it's in the form or the shape that a person goes to plant it in, that's still going to be able to transmit tuma. And how do you plant wheat? Chita bekli basa. When you plant wheat, you don't need to separate the outside, the bran or whatever it is on the outside. You don't have to take that off in order to plant it in the ground. You just can plant the whole thing in the ground. Usaora bekli pasa. And barley, the same thing. So therefore, the outer wrapping or the shell is included in the item when you count the volume to determine if it's food, if it has enough for food tuma. Va'adoshim and lentils bekli pasan. V'lo shomrim letuma chamura minal. And how do I know that there's no such thing as shomrim when it comes to the greater level of tuma when it comes to tumas nevela? De Tana Rabbanan, because the rabbis learned. Be nivlasa, right? It becomes tuma, comes tamei in its status as a nevela, as dead carcass. Velo be'or, not the skin, she'ein alav kazayas basar, which does not have a kazayas of meat on it. If the skin does not have a kazayas of meat on it, so you can't say, well, I've got half kazayas of meat and I've got some skin, so the skin covers the meat, so therefore it includes. Yachol hanogea keneged basar me'achorav, lo yehe tamei. We're going to have to stop at some point in the middle because it's going to be continues all the way down to the next side of the page. But we are on up to date, right? But chol hanogea keneged basar me'achorav, lo yehe tamei. You might think that if I touch, let's say I come to the to the animal, and the meat is on the inside of the animal, and I touch from the outside of the animal. So I might think that doesn't transmit tuma because the skin is in the way. So Talmud Lomar, the pasuk says, Yitama, the tuma will transfer. So my ka'amar. So what does that mean? So Amar Rava says Vamri La Kidi. Some say some say Kidi. Kidi is anonymous, or that's the name of the Tana. We've had that before. Chisur mechsur. This piece missing in this brisa. This is what you have to read it. V'hachikitani. Benivlasa. You read, the animal becomes tamei in its status as nevela. Velo beor she'en alav kazayas basar. Not by skin that doesn't have a kazayas of meat. If you have a dead carcass, you only say all I have is the hide, right? Bearskin rug. So that doesn't transmit tumor. That's not nevela. There's no meat attached to it. So there's no nevela there. Ve'or mashlimo bekazayas. If I've got a piece of meat and the skin is going to add on to it to make it into a kazayas, so Yochel Shani Motzi Af, so therefore that's not going to be, that the pasuk doesn't tell me, no, but nivla, so you need to have a portion of nevela of the meat in order to transmit the tuma. So Yochel Shani Motzi Af or Sheyeshel Kazayis Basar, I might think, okay, well, once the skin can't transmit tuma, maybe even if I have a kazayis of meat, the skin is going to block me from transmitting tuma. Hanoget keneged basar me'achor. If I touch the skin on the skin side, I'm not touching the meat. Yachol lo yehi tamei. It might not be tamei. Va'afilu ma'aseh yad nami lo avid. Talmud lomar yitma. So the pasuk says no. Yitma. You become tamei in that circumstance. So you do become tamei if you touch the skin if it has a kazayas of nevela on it. But the skin itself won't add to the half a kazayas of nevela in order to make it into a nevela. Okay, that's our place where we will end for today.